Our common foods today didn't come from common places. On this episode of Wild vs. Domesticated Foods, we take a look at the origin of some of our most popular foods. Requested by Henry over on my Patreon, wheat, a grain used for thousands of years by humans, started its domestication almost 10,000 years ago. A staple food of humans, along with maize and barley, wheat started its cultivation in southeast Turkey, and at the time it was called einkorn. Now quickly I'll mention before someone boils over, rice is the second largest cereal crop produced today, but its production was localized to Asia, not making it a global food at the time wheat was going through domestication. Containing two sets of chromosomes, wheat is genetically described as a diploid. Along the same time einkorn was being domesticated, so was emmer wheat. Emmer wheat was created by the natural hybridization between Triticum eurytu and the Aegilops species, both being wild grasses. Both wild grasses were diploids, which yielded a tetraploid, or one with 4 sets of chromosomes, which is the same as durum wheat, a common wheat grown today. Durum wheat was created in the same manner as emmer wheat, using natural hybridization. These at one point, wild grasses, became the domesticated wheat we know today, as farmers made selections based on different wheat's beneficial traits like yield size and ease of harvest. Common bread wheat and spelt were also a result of natural hybridization and became the ideal choice for farmers. Emmer wheat and Aegilops tauschii, or the wild goat grass, were selected. This combination yielded a 6 chromosome or hexaploid wheat, which took many generations to fully develop. Originating between the Black and Caspian Seas, sweet cherry domestication dates back before recorded history. The earliest known mention of the sweet cherry goes back to 372 to 272 BCE. Theophrastus's History of Plants had mentioned cherries had been cultivated for hundreds of years in Greece. Pliny, a philosopher, suggested the Roman general Lucullus introduced cherries to Europe in 74 BCE, but there's evidence that shows cherries were already known in Italy well before then. Cherry pits have been found in several Stone Age caves in Europe. In the 1300s, King Charles V of France had over 1,000 cherries planted in his gardens. Turkey, the largest producer of cherries in the region, is also the origin of the name of the fruit, coming from the Turkish town of Sarasus. Colonists from the 1600s migrated from Europe, bringing cherries with them. In 1847, Henderson Llewellyn brought an ox cart full of plants to western Oregon, which became the first cherry tree to be planted in the northwestern United States. Henderson's younger brother Seth created the most famous sweet cherry variety known today, the Bing, as well as some lesser known ones like the Lincoln and Black Republican. The Lincoln was named after President Lincoln, as he was a strong supporter of his cherries. The Bing, named after Seth's friend and orchard foreman, was a towering man over 7 feet tall. In 1952, the Rainier cherry was created by crossbreeding the Bing and Van varieties. Having the shortest period between flowering and ripe fruit than any other tree fruit, the cherry can be ready in just 60 days. Other cherries have since been created, such as the maraschino dessert cherry, which originated on the Balkan Peninsula in northern Italy. Merchants added liqueur to local cherries called marasca. These cherries became an import product to the United States in the 1890s. In 1896, producers of cherries in the US started to experiment with domestic sweet cherries, reducing the liqueur and adding almond oil. By 1920, the liqueur had been eliminated completely, and the American maraschino cherry had become more popular in the United States, replacing the foreign variety. A few fun facts about cherries. In New York, Broadway turns west at East 10th because a cherry tree once stood there. There are more than 1,000 varieties of cherries in the United States. Only 10 are produced commercially. In Kansas, at one point, made it illegal to serve ice cream on cherry pie. Dating back 14 centuries to Yemen and Ethiopia, coffee's origin will be fought over by both countries with no proof which country it really came from. It is said that Kaldi, a goat herder, discovered what coffee would become. Apparently after eating some of the coffee beans, Kaldi noticed his goats couldn't sleep at night. He reported these findings at a local monastery, which were not welcome. In fact, the monk burned the coffee berries and the beans, which yielded a wonderful aroma. These burnt remnants of the coffee beans were mixed with water, essentially creating the first cup of coffee. News of this discovery at the monastery spread fast, which is what began the spread of coffee and its energizing effects. Historians believe that the coffee was mixed with ghee or clarified butter or animal fat and rolled into small balls and chewed before it was ever made into a drink. After its local popularity, this bean moved east across the Arabian Peninsula. The cultivation of this plant began in the Arabian Peninsula, but it was growing in Yemen, Persia, Turkey, Syria, and Egypt by the 16th century. Public coffee houses started to show up in towns and cities called Kwabe Kane. These places exploded with popularity, with people coming together to talk, listen to music, watch performers, and play games like chess. These places became the place where people would talk and exchange important information, and were often referred to as schools of the wise. European travelers returning home on a journey to the east brought back stories of an unusual black beverage. Soon after the 17th century, coffee had become popular across all of Europe. Now, the coffee haters of the world called it the bitter invention of Satan, so it wasn't loved by all. Clergy of Venice condemned coffee when it arrived in 1615. This caused so much of an uproar that Pope Clement VIII had to step in and make a decision on it. He tasted it for himself, loved it, and gave it his approval. Same thing happened in Europe. As their eastern neighbors, coffee houses were popping up all throughout Germany, England, France, Holland, and Austria, serving as meeting points for people. In England, for the price of a single penny, you could buy a cup of coffee and engage in conversation, spurring on the term penny universities. Coffee soon replaced common morning beverages, beer and wine, resulting in new waves of people being alert, energized, and highly productive. By the mid-17th century, 300 coffee houses called London home, which drew in many artists, merchants, and brokers like Lloyd's of London, which started at Edward Lloyd's Coffee House. Brought to New Amsterdam, or what's called New York today, by the British, coffee's popularity arose quickly in the United States, but tea was the preferred beverage. This all changed when King George II imposed a heavy tea tax in 1773, which caused colonists to revolt, resulting in the Boston Tea Party, which was 342 chests of tea dumped into the harbor, and coffee soon after became the favored beverage. Around this time, just a few years earlier, in 1720, through French naval officers like Gabriel Leclerc, coffee plants were brought on his ship and planted in Martinique. We do know, despite his efforts, coffee had already been growing in Haiti and the Dominican Republic and Suriname a few years before his arrival. From here, its popularity spread throughout the rest of the world. We don't really know if the coffee bean, which is actually a seed, originated from southwestern highlands of Ethiopia or from the area around the city of Mocha in Yemen, but maybe some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. The sugar apple, and an incredibly sweet, delicious fruit, likely comes from the wild sugar apple, or Rollinia. Rollinia is a large jungle fruit with complicated origins. Conflicting journals state that the origin of this delicious fruit comes from two different places. One journal states it is to be indigenous to the West Indies and tropical South America, where the other claims it came from the lowland Central America and it was distributed to Mexico and eventually throughout tropical America. We do know the sugar apple has been grown in the West Indies since at least 1689. We know this because this was the time of Sir Hans Sloane's voyage to Jamaica when he collected samples of the fruit. It's likely the sugar apple was introduced into Brazil in 1626 by Conde de Miranda and was brought to the Philippines by the Spaniards and India by the Portuguese by 1590. Once established in these locations, sugar apple cultivation spread to nearby China, Australia, Hawaii, and Indonesia. Being so popular commercially in India, many botanists claim this is where it came from. These claims are supported with the presence of wall paintings and carvings. However, a more recent 2005 journal states India was the second location of the sugar apple. We do know the purple sugar apple, this beautiful variety, was created in India in 1911. Not much is known how the Rollinia was domesticated, but it is stated that it is the base for multiple different annona fruits, including the soursop, cherimoya, and atamoya fruit. These fruits, along with the sugar apple, are distinguished as botanical species instead of cultivars. Today, the sugar apple is grown not only in Central America, but northern South America, including northeastern Brazil, where it is quite popular. It's also a staple of the Philippines, Thailand, and Cuba. Only Florida and Hawaii can produce them in the United States. An attempt was made to grow them in Southern California without success, though. Found only in parts of southeastern Turkey and Syria, the ancestor of the chickpea, or Cicer verticulatum, was believed to be domesticated over 11,000 years ago. Being part of the first farming practices on the planet, chickpeas have become instrumental in how all food is produced today. It is said to be one of the 8 founding crops of agriculture, which are, as mentioned earlier, einkorn wheat, emmer wheat, barley, bitter vetch, beans, lentils, chickpeas, and flax. The wild chickpea was most likely domesticated in Turkey, which we can't confirm until time machines are a thing. We can confirm that domesticated chickpea was found at different locations dating back to different times around Turkey and Syria though. This initial stage of domestication took place during the pre-pottery Neolithic period, which yielded the first variety of chickpea, the desi. There are 2 main groups of chickpeas, or garbanzo beans, being the desi and the kabuli. It's believed the desi came first, but between them both there are 21 different varieties that come in all sorts of different shapes and colors. I grew the black chickpea myself in my garden last year, which didn't yield very many chickpeas, but that's probably due to a lack of heat. You really come to appreciate modern machinery, as harvesting chickpeas is tedious. Each pod contains a single chickpea and needs to be opened individually. It's believed the desi, the smaller angular chickpea, originated in Turkey, was later brought to India, where the other main chickpea, the kabuli, was developed. The kabuli is the common chickpea consumed today, which are larger and more round. Through the process of domestication, the wild chickpea gained many traits. One of these is double the amount of tryptophan. You know, that amino acid in turkey makes you sleepy? Or is that a myth? Tryptophan does boost brain serotonin levels, which accelerates growth and increases birth rates. While chickpea is only harvested in winter when it's ripe, a second season harvest in summer is an important added trait. This also reduces the harvesting pressure in winter when more water is available. In winter, chickpeas are susceptible to Paschota blight, a disease that can wipe out an entire crop, so having a second harvest became important. In 2013, the chickpea had its genome sequenced, showing more diversity in the desi line of chickpeas, suggesting it came first. Today being the world's second most widely grown legume, the chickpea is only outproduced by the soybean. Which story of domestication did you find most interesting, and which did you want me to cover next? Share your thoughts, subscribe to the channel, and until the next one, have a good one.